back, folks. This is Shoot the Ones, a weekly MMA podcast with your Ukrainian host with the most, and we are fired up to bring you the big episode 20. I am Dema.
And I'm Genya. Crazy, we made it all the way to 20 episodes, Dema. What a wild weekend, man. It was a lot of fun. In this episode, we review Bellator 180, Sonnen vs. Silva, as well as Fight Night 112, Chiesa vs. Lee. And Dema and I go over some of this week's news.
Yeah, guys, before we get right into it, catch us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, and MMApodcast.com.
Very cool, Dema. Starting off the news for this week, how about Cyborg's got a new opponent?
Yep, we keep talking about Cyborg. Probably because she keeps getting a change of opponents. People don't want to fight her. A variety of reasons come up. It's a crazy thing, man. It's an up and down roller coaster every time Cyborg has to fight.
Yeah, you make a good point, man. It's quite interesting that every time Cyborg has a fight, her opponent just has personal issues.
Injuries, you name it, man.
It's typically personal issues is the one I've noticed the most, which I guess it's a personal issue that you don't want to get your ass kicked. And I get it, man. Fighting Cyborg is a scary proposition. And Dema, you know what's really cool, though? They were able to find a pretty formidable opponent for Cyborg. They got the 135-pound champ over in Invicta. She was going to take Megan Anderson's spot for the 145-pound title prior to this. But now she's going to go over and fight Cyborg.
And what I like particularly about this is she didn't show any hesitancy in taking this fight. She went up and said, "I'll go ahead and take this fight without any doubt, without any hesitancy." And despite the odds being against her, you know, she's showing a brave face.
I agree, Dema. And for the listeners that don't really know about Tanya Evinger, she's like a real pioneer of the women's game. She's been around for pretty much the entire existence of the women's game, and she has a strong game on the ground. Like, she's no slouch. In my opinion, she's a better opponent than Megan Anderson for Cyborg at this moment in their careers. Does that mean that she's going to really challenge Cyborg? Probably not. I mean, Cyborg is a beast, and like, girls run away from Cyborg for a reason. It's not by mistake.
Hey, man, I don't mind this. Megan is still a little bit green. She still has some things to learn and really brush up in her game, whereas Tanya Evinger is an old and proven veteran. As far as the matchup, it's kind of obvious what she's going to try to do. She's going to come in and try to take her down and, work the ground game. So it's going to be interesting to see. And she's a tough old gal, She's been around for a minute.
Yeah, that's kind of what I talked about on the last episode a little bit, was I said I think Megan's going to be pretty darn good, but I don't think she's quite there yet. And that's basically what you said right there, but in a little bit broader terms.
Essentially. Moving into the next big chunk of news we have, I want to talk about a fight that was announced and added to the UFC 214 card in Anaheim, California. That being Woodley and Maia. That's official now.
I'm feeling pretty good about that, man. That is a good fight, Dema. Like, these are two guys that, like, if somebody tells me that they know who's gonna win this fight, like, I'm calling bullshit, man. This is a tough fight to call.
Man, it's a good fight. It's definitely one of the ones we were asking for. Maia definitely deserves it. It's the time. It's good to see that it finally gets a date.
It's definitely pumping up the UFC 214 card, which is already looking stacked. But getting back to this matchup, how do you feel they match up against each other?
Man, I feel it's a pretty close matchup, but we did have a couple of insights given to us by our guest, Ricky Rainey, and he made a couple of really good points. I mean, when it comes to grappling and wrestling, Woodley is no slouch. It's going to be a lot tougher to take him down. There's going to be a couple of really interesting challenges posed to Demian Maia here, but we know what his game plan is going to be.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the way I kind of look at this. I see Woodley as elite athlete, top-notch wrestler that knows a little jiu-jitsu. That got into jiu-jitsu. He's pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Damian Maia is like almost the counter opposite of that. He's not really the wrestler. But his jiu-jitsu is otherworldly. If he gets anybody's back in that division, he's gonna win that fight 9 times out of 10. Maybe Masvidal he didn't choke out, but he'll still control the round and win that round that way if he doesn't finish you. But he's in my eyes the best MMA jiu-jitsu practitioner.
And he did handle people of wrestling degree or pedigree rather, with in dominating fashion, like his Chael Sonnen fight, for example.
Woodley, on the other hand, he's, like I said, an elite wrestler. So he's typically able to keep fights where he wants to. He's not an easy guy to take down. In fact, I think he's one of the hardest.
Not only that, he also has a clear advantage in the striking game. He's more explosive. He's got more power, without question.
Oh yeah, he's definitely gonna have that. You're right. He's definitely gonna have that advantage in the striking, and I'm pretty certain of that. But Maia doesn't really look to strike, so this is gonna be an interesting. Like, what's gonna be interesting is, can Maia get in his positions? Can he make the fight uncomfortable for Woodley, or is Woodley gonna be able to be in his zone, in his safe range, where he's kind of piecing up Maia all night, which it could be a real tough night for Maia as well.
And guys, we have a classic matchup. I mean, we have a Royce Gracie 2.0, like modern day, in Damian Maia, and he's fighting the American wrestler boxer, like your classical mixed martial arts combination.
Think about it like that, but that's an excellent analogy, Dima. Regardless, Woodley, you got to appreciate him for taking any matchup. He's taking the hardest guys. Like, a lot of champs, get a little bit of shit or flack for, picking their fights. And Woodley is kind of taking the hardest ones out there. And, I mean, regardless what you thought of the decision between him and Wonder Boy, you got to give him props for taking the hardest opponent out there in Maia.
Yeah, and he might bitch and complain a little bit on his way, but he is a man of his word, and he does take these fights. He shows up, and he walked away with the belt in his last two, like we saw.
After that bit of badass news right there, we got a little bit more disappointing news next. Donald Cerrone is out due to staph, blood infection, and he pulled a groin.
Man, that's like a cabinet of injuries right there.
Yeah, I agree. I was really looking forward to the fight with Robbie Lawler. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. My best wishes and condolences to Cerrone. I hope he gets better soon.
Yeah, exactly. I heard a couple of rumors. They might postpone this fight and make it happen at a later date, or you might have suggested something that might be in the works or might not be in the works. Or is this just something that you want to see happen?
Well, I think it just came to my head. I was just like, I want to see their second fight, but Nick Diaz doesn't have a fight. Why not?
Yeah, I agree, actually.
I think it'd be fun, man. Their first fight was epic.
It was epic, but is it going to happen? Is Nick going to take this fight? That's a whole nother question.
I don't even know if Nick fights anymore, to be honest with you.
Now, would I like to see it? For sure. For sure. But yeah, tough one for Cerrone. As we said before, we wish him a speedy recovery. Moving into the next little bit of news, it's another fight announcement. This one doesn't have as much of information or details about it yet, but it finally feels good to say DJ and Ray Borg is going to happen. A fight DJ was really pulling for.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I wanted to see DJ versus Dillashaw, but, after all we found out about the situation and that he was offered this fight first and he was doing it for, like, as a favor for the UFC, it's a little bit, like he deserves it now.
Yeah, it feels a little like, justice has been served, and Dana's pretty heated about it. He came out and said, I'm sure this is going to draw great pay-per-view numbers, and he was being a sarcastic asshole about it. But, that's Dana being Dana.
He would be. Yeah, Dana's not really happy about too many things.
He didn't get his way. It's whatever. But we do get to see a good fight. The fight that makes sense. He doesn't have to jump divisions. I would like to see him fight TJ down the road, perhaps, maybe. It was a cool matchup, but
Yeah,
it didn't make sense for him at that time.
yeah, we spoke about it on prior episodes, and maybe Ray Borg's gonna come out and surprise me, but I just don't think he's ready for Mighty Mouse yet.
Pretty solid assessment.
And our last piece of news: the California State Athletic Commission denies Barao to fight at 135 pounds versus Aljamain Sterling. However, the match will still take place at 140 pounds.
This is interesting. A bit of a head scratcher at first, but we did a little looking into this, and there's a couple of points that we want to talk about. Being Renan Barao missed 3-4 fights in that division.
Yeah, I remember one was like at UFC 177. A couple times he was completely pulled out, and sometimes like the same day of the fight. So the California State Athletic Commission is like, hey, we've been burned before. Don't want to let this keep happening.
Not only that, but I don't think they trust his corner or him as a fighter to make the sound decisions for his health and not put himself in the same kinds of risks and dangers that he exposed himself to in these severe weight cuts before.
Yeah. A little bit of background about me. I've been me and Demo typically watch all these fights together. This week I haven't been around, so we haven't. Typically, me and Demo we discuss all this. So this is cool, man. We're sitting down, we're kind of talking about it for the first time, and we were, however, able to sit down and discuss this one a little bit, and it made sense why they're not letting Barao fight. I mean, he has burned them a lot of times. They think it's unsafe. He's gotten sick doing it before. And at the same time, it's a health risk at this point. But we had an interesting discussion. That's what I was talking about earlier. That's why I even brought up that point. We had an interesting discussion. And that's how much is 5 pounds for a fighter? Is that really a big deal?
I think when it gets to the point of where, he has to, sometimes 3 pounds will be a big deal. Like Johnny couldn't cut that last 3 pounds, in his last.
I agree. When the
Fight
guys
night.
are getting that small.
Yeah. I think it's a health risk still.
Yeah. Well,
So
hopefully they'll still have a good fight. It kind of becomes a head scratcher as what the meaning to the fight is.
I think
No.
they're gonna push him to move up, and this is gonna potentially be his last attempt at the 135, which is not even gonna be 135. It's
So-
gonna be 140 now.
He never got to make another attempt in that case. Like, this is supposed to be his return fight.
Yeah, and California is kind of taking the lead here in changing and enforcing some of these new rule sets and weight regulations as far as MMA goes. So interesting to see them put the foot down and say, hey, instead of kind of UFC, usually the role was kind of relinquished to the organization to say, hey, you shouldn't fight at this weight. But this is perhaps a first case where we saw a state commission go out and kind of make the decision.
Yeah, they're a little bit innovative, man, in the things that they're doing, especially like what you talked about with the weight, implementing not only new weight classes, but ways of weighing the fighters. They're really thinking about these guys' health a lot more than instead of like some of these other athletic commissions that are so reactionary. They're kind of proactive here with the California State Athletic Commission, which I've been really impressed with.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a bummer, but the fight's still gonna happen, so it's good. Now that we got a little bit of news out the way, we are going to hit you with a short break and be back with a couple of events that happened this weekend, namely Bellator 180 and UFC Fight Night 112. This week's episode of Shoot the Ones podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Local Liquids, the premier vape shop located at 400 West Rosemary Street in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Listen, put down a pack of cigarettes and check out www.local-liquids.com for their wide variety of e-liquids, devices, and coil selections. Tell them Dema sent you for an additional 10% off your purchase. Local Liquids, your premier North Carolina vape shop. And now to the show.
Welcome back, loyal Shoot the Ones listeners. It was a wild weekend, Dema, and oddly and uniquely, Bellator was kind of the main event of the weekend.
Yeah, arguably their biggest show ever. They packed the building in Madison Square Garden. They, put on a hell of a show. There was some real, good contender matchups. There was championship belts. There was a couple of circus shows. There was, it was an up and down event.
Well said, Dema. This card had a little bit of everything in it. I mean, it had surprises, huge prospects going down, great fights, and, just legendary moments. I felt like it was really worth your bang.
So let's get right into it. For the Bellator 180 prelim card on Spike TV, we saw a couple of really exciting matchups. We saw a debut of a professional boxer, Heather Hardy. We saw James Gallagher do his thing in the Chinzo Machida fight, and Ryan Bader and Phil Davis had pretty good competitive matchup. How did you feel about the prelim portion?
I thought it was fun. James Gallagher's a rising star. Wasn't too thrilled about the decision. I mean, I bet my money on Bader, so I guess I was thrilled I won. But it was one of those things where I was like, he didn't win that fight. He didn't win that fight. I thought he might have lost all 3 rounds, but probably at least lost 2. And Ryan Couture looked really impressive.
Yeah, that was their web prelims that were on, I believe, Bellator.com.
Mm-hmm. He fought Israeli Chaim Ghazali.
Indeed. But going back to the Spike TV part of things, James Gallagher looked really good against Chinzo. Did you catch that fight?
I did. I did. And, James Gallagher is kind of known for his groundwork. I didn't know he was this impressive. I knew he was pretty good, and he's a good prospect. I had him winning this fight. But I thought Chinzo, was going to be a pretty solid matchup for him. Was going to maybe give him a little trouble here, a little trouble there. Didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was going to be more of a challenge for this up-and-coming Irishman. But, he continues to rise and impress nonetheless. James Gallagher is, definitely has ways to go. But, he's doing all the right things. He's saying all the right things. And he's looking good in there.
Yeah, and as you said, Heather Hardy made her debut, and she had a pretty tough fight, but she was able to finish by punches like right at the end of that fight. And what's interesting about her is she's actually undefeated in boxing. She's got over 20 victories, and she's a good prospect, and she's good on the microphone. Like afterwards in the press conferences, she was really good. She's somebody to definitely keep an eye out on.
Yeah, she looks good. She speaks good for Bellator, and she looked good in this fight. Like she really let her hands go in the later stages of the fight, and was able to, bring things to a close there at the end.
But what was really fun about this event was the main card, man. This main card was pretty dope.
Yep, the meat and potatoes, as we like to say on the show here at Shoot the Ones.
That's right, Demon. Starting off the night, they had a championship fight between Douglas Lima and Lorenz Larkin, who had just came over from the UFC and was real hungry to win that belt, but couldn't take it from Lima's grasp, Dema.
Man, what a way to start the show. I mean, right away you get a championship fight, and their champion, Douglas Lima, looked fantastic in this fight.
Yeah, man, this was a good fight. And what's interesting about this fight is it's the only one that sets up a next opponent. Like, Lima's going to fight Rory next. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's the only matchup after this card that Coker, has set in stone. And this was a good fight, man. He's one, like we talked about in the prior episode, he's maybe one of the biggest welterweights out there. And, man, he can punch, and he's willing to stand there and exchange punches. And he's dangerous. And he's, pretty crafty in there. He's a good wrestler, good jiu-jitsu, real veteran of the game. He's a good fighter.
Yeah, exactly. And, he showed a clear speed advantage. His combinations were good. And Lorenz Larkin, he had his moments in there, but ultimately he got outshined by the champion, which I'm going to be honest here. I did not really see this. I thought it was going to be a little bit more competitive.
I thought it was a pretty darn competitive fight, man. Lawrence Larkin looked real hungry. He looked better than he ever had before. Like he looked like he really wanted to be
Don't get
Bellator's
me
champ.
wrong. I mean, he was hungry and he was going after it, but I just did not anticipate that kind of a defense from the champion.
I think the turning point of that fight was in round 2 where Lima rocked him.
Yep.
And that kind of changed the whole dynamic of the fight. I thought it was a different fight after Lima rocked him, and I had Lima winning, but nevertheless, I'm very impressed.
Speaking of impressive, in this next fight, lightweight division, Zach Freeman upsets Aaron Pico, a highly touted prospect that we were kind of big riding it, riding into this main event, and man, this kind of fell face first.
Demon, we weren't the only ones big on Aaron Pico. This is arguably the biggest, crossover star to MMA in a very long time. And I mean, there were reporters saying that this kid's the next Conor McGregor. People were talking all kinds of like lofty expectations, and Zach Freeman looked like a real pro in there. And that's what this was, man. This was a very experienced difference, and it showed, man. 8-2, challenge for a belt versus a guy who was legit 0-0.
I'm so reminiscent of it was kind of like when what's his name was coming up in the UFC. What's the kid's name? The big blonde kid.
Riddle?
No, you know who I'm talking about. Northcutt.
Oh, Sage.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
and then
yeah.
they throw him in there, and it was like, oh, he's gonna do fantastic, and he got smoked his first fight.
What an odd. I said Riddle. Yeah, you're right. They did have huge, lofty expectations, and he's one of those guys. But I think Pico's background was even more legit. Like Northcutt was pretty good. Well, actually, he was on the cover of like a karate magazine at age 6, so he was really good at karate. But Aaron Pico was, he's the biggest prospect to enter Bellator, that's for sure, and MMA in general in a while. And Zach Freeman was, he was calm, he was steady, and he was ready to take that victory, even though, he probably had people in his ear all week like, oh, this guy's going to murder you, man. This guy's going to take you out. And Freeman was like, he wasn't hearing any of that noise. He came in and spoiled the party, and he did it real quick, man. What was it, 20-some seconds?
24 seconds very first round of the fight.
Damn.
Guillotine choke. Yep.
That's
Sunk
impressive.
it in there, and hell yeah.
For a guy I haven't really heard too much about, that's super impressive.
Yeah, this guy has a full-time job on the side, and he trains as a hobby and does MMA.
Yeah, and my last point on that, did you notice their size difference a little bit?
Yeah.
Freeman was a much bigger fighter. I mean, Pico's a muscled guy, but Freeman was a much bigger guy in there. Like it looked like 10 pounds difference.
Well, bigger or taller, lankier?
They looked to be in different weight classes, like when they were fighting.
I guess
But
some
by
people.
the point of the fight, it looked like they were 2 different weight classes.
I think getting the weight cut down is a science, and some people are better than others at doing it. So you can really drop down, do it in a healthy way, and come back 10, 15 pounds heavier the next day, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, next fight was also quite the surprise. Brent Primus takes the championship belt, but not without controversy.
Yeah, this was a little bit of a bummer. I mean, Michael Chandler got really hurt there.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it was anything Primus did. I think Chandler's ankle just kind of gave out. I mean, I might be wrong. It might have been one of the kicks that helped it, I didn't see it. I watched that fight back a number of times, and I haven't seen it, man. It just looks like one of those freak accidents.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I think he was stumbling on his way back and kind of stepped on his, ankle the wrong way and kind of tweaked it there, which, surprisingly enough, or not, it happened to me a couple times, and yeah, that shit kind of sucks.
Yeah, as a basketball player, it happened to me also, but logically, I guess the only thing that makes sense is a rematch. I mean, Michael Chandler has earned it. At this point, he's kind of the face of Bellator, and I don't really count that as a loss. Like I'll see it as a loss on his record. When I pull up his record, but I don't really like in history. It doesn't really go down as a loss in my eyes.
I mean, it will on the books, but with a clear asterisk next to it. Obviously, bummer. He suffered an injury, but Primus, looked good before the injury happened and was in the fight throwing the kicks, as you pointed out. I want to see a rematch. Obviously, this is the next step. He is their patented lightweight champion. It's a bummer that the injury happened and the fight ended this way. So down the road, we're going to see a rematch for sure. Moving into a next fight in the heavyweight division, Matt Mitrione defeats Fedor Emelianenko. Very first round KO punch. Man, this was kind of a crazy finish, man.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this, man. It was fun. I'll put it that way. You don't see a double knockdown every day in MMA, and it seemed like Meathead just had more in it to recover. He had a little bit quicker recovery time. It seemed like his punch probably landed a little bit more flush, and he was able to finish Fedor, and that was the difference.
Exactly. I mean, they both saw the window and they timed that straight right. Both threw it at the same time, connected, fell right down from the impact, but the faster, the younger, less worn down fighter recovered faster here and jumped on top of Fedor and was able to finish him. And, he actually knocked him out with the ground and pound. As a big Fedor fan, that was tough to watch.
Yeah, despite our guy losing, though, man, that was a really fun fight. It was everything it was meant to be. They came out. The crowd was super hyped behind both guys, man. The atmosphere was there. They both came in with a pretty good performance. And Meathead stole the show on the mic afterwards, telling, Donald Trump, fuck the Warriors. I'm the real warrior. Invite me to the White House. He kind of stole the show. And I mean, Meathead's quite the character. Fedor's quite the character. They'll move on. I mean, this wasn't like one of those career-ending knockouts for Fedor. In fact, after at the press conference when he was asked if he's going to fight again, he said, "Of course, I'm a fighter."
Which he got a big round of applause for, and it's a very admirable response. But man, it's a tough sport, man. It's a tough sport that we love.
Yeah.
So I love it and I hate it for this same reason right here. I mean, you grow attached to fighters. You have a favorite fighter. You come up with them. You see them in their rise. They go through the highest of the highs, and then when the age thing happens, man, it's the roughest thing to see. Especially if it's your most favorite fighter. The age thing is like it happens to everyone. It's inevitable, and somebody has been through so many wars, which is the reason why we love them. You see the decline, and it's heartbreaking. Which is why the sport, the highest are high and the lowest are low, and that's why I fucking love it and I hate it at the same time.
Yeah, there's definitely some guys when you first got into MMA that you admire, and Fedor's definitely one of those for many, many MMA fans. And I mean, it's tough seeing our guy lose, but at the same time, man, as a gambler, I'm always getting new favorite fighters. Every day I'm getting new favorite fighters, man. I feel happy for Meathead.
Well, that's part of why I love it, man. You have the seasons, the cycles. The old guys they come and they go, they pass, and the new guys they come up, they rise, they get older, they experience the shine, and then it's time for them to pass, and then the next generation comes. But it happens so fast in the sport. It's very sudden.
That's a very good point, man. And that's exactly what happens. Like one day your favorite fighter's on top of the world. 5 years later, they lose 5 fights in a row, like BJ Penn that we're going to talk about later. You know what I mean?
So yeah, man, it's rough. It's rough. But at the same time, it's one of the most exhilarating, exciting sports that we have so much passion for.
Yeah, due to the pretty quick pace of the Bellator main event card, they were able to feature the swing bout actually on TV, where a member of the Gracie family, Neiman Gracie, defeated Dave Marfone by submission rear naked choke. And what it wasn't too thrilling to fight, but impressive performance by Gracie nevertheless.
Oh yeah, they did sneak that one in there. Yeah.
They did.
Okay. It was kind of weird timing wise. So they were originally reserving it for post event,
Well,
right?
Bellator always has. Bellator does a little bit different than UFC. They always have a swing bout. So, like, say they have like a bunch of quick knockouts on their main card,
Mm-hmm.
they'll be like, "Oh, we got this swing bout," like they did, and they're able to fight in front of the fans. And from my understanding, like if the fights are like 5 rounders, take a long time, that fight goes untelevised to the back of the card. Like they would fight after Chael and Vanderlei Silva.
Gotcha. This is a little bit strange seeing it. Do you think it took away from the co-main event?
No, I actually liked the way that. The only thing I didn't like that Bellator did was I was not too thrilled before the main event. They had the Star Spangled Banner. That might be an unpopular opinion, but I just thought it took too much time. But no, I didn't, man. I thought like after that thrilling fight between Mitrio and Fedor, it was good to kind of get a little bit of break because I was real back pumped about Chelson and Vanderlei Silva.
Which ended up not being as an exciting of a fight, but nonetheless, it was good for Bellator.
I disagree with you, man. It's depending on what kind of MMA fan you are. If you appreciate the wrestling game and you know what Chael had to do to win, then that was a heck of a fight. If you're just in there to watch him swing and bang, like Derek Lewis style,
I'm looking at this is the last fight of the card, which was, up to this point, rising and, becoming exciting,
yeah.
exciting. Then they drop the swing bat on you, and then this fight isn't exactly swinging and banging, but, as a hardcore fan, I liked it. As a casual, looking from that perspective, that was kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, maybe I'm a different kind of MMA fan because I can really appreciate when a guy like Chael Sonnen is able to use his elite wrestling to just nullify a guy, to make the guy like Vanderlei Silva couldn't do anything. He couldn't get off his back, and I kind of put the omen on the guy on his back to be able to get off his back.
Yeah, he really didn't do much when he got put on his ass. He kind of just held on to Chael and was waiting for it to stand up, it seems.
Yeah, impressive showing for the bad guy, and I mean he was awesome on the mic like always. He got people pissed off, and I mean people still don't know it's just a show with him. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's playing the fiddle, he's doing his thing, and people are buying into it, man. You had Tito heckling him on the side, like I thought it was quite the show, man. The whole Bellator experience for Bellator 180. It was nothing like I've seen from Bellator before. They had new hosts. Brendan Schaub was in there, Mauro Ranallo, Goldberg.
Yeah, which was
a completely new look.
Yeah, and the new voice, new sound. I mean, I think with this new additions to their commentary team, Bellator is going to sound pretty good now. The way they're kind of a little bit more in entertainment aspect, kind of like pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I get that vibe off of him, and I'm like, or even early days of MMA.
Like I was under the impression Goldberg would be like side by side with Jimmy, like he was with Joe Rogan.
Well, he was for the prelims, but then they switched back to Mauro Ranallo. They did a lot of switching back and forth of commentators.
I missed a lot of the prelims. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, I would prefer to hear Goldberg, actually commentating the fight rather than that like desk stuff. Like, hey, look at what we just saw. That was fun.
They gave him that role for the main card, but he was actually in the booth during the prelims. So
okay,
that was good. He was there doing it with Jimmy.
It's a really hard choice between the two of them.
Yeah, and look at Morrow. He's doing 100 different jobs. Since he bounced back with the WWE, he's going to be doing the Connor fight. He got this gig, and he's doing all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's a good look for Bellator. I mean, they're upgrading on their product. It seems weekly, they're upgrading at a much faster pace than any promotion that I can remember.
With that said, Scott Coker did say that Bellator is going to be, quote unquote, using the Strikeforce 2.0 strategy and aggressively pursuing every possible free agent. So, yep, going to be an exciting thing to see.
Man, I had a blast talking about this card, but We had even more fights this weekend. So after this break, we're going to go over UFC Fight Night 112, which had Chiesa Lee as the main event. Listeners, did you enjoy the music you heard on today's podcast? Shoot the Ones collaborates with the local and up-and-coming top music producers in the area. Music for today's podcast was brought to you by Jay Blanked and Deep Theory. Check out the link to their SoundCloud page in our description.
Welcome back, listeners. We are here to talk about the second fight card of the weekend, the UFC Fight Night 112 with Chiesa versus Lee. We're going to briefly go over the Fight Pass prelims. We saw victories from Jeremy Kimball. Hey, the guy that looks like me won again in a pretty impressive fashion.
He was impressive.
Tony Martin had a pretty good fight against Johnny Case. Was a unanimous decision win for him. Jared Gordon pulled off a TKO finish against Mikel Quinones in the second round, which was a catchweight bout at 149 pounds.
Yeah, Gordon missed, but nevertheless, very good debut on his part. I mean, first round was pretty close between him and Quinones, but he was able to come in and dominate the second round and knock him out.
Indeed. So a couple of decisions happened on the Fox Sports 2 portion of the card, and this was about where I joined during Sunday. I had to rewatch a couple of the earlier fights a little bit.
Yeah, Darrell Horcher was able to improve his record to 1-1 in the UFC by beating Devin Powell. Carla Esparza was able to out-wrestle and outwork Moroz pretty thoroughly in her fight, Dema.
Yep, just a dominant win for Carla. Good to see her get back in there.
And Vettori was able to take a hard-fought decision win over Vitor Miranda.
Indeed. But this next fight right here is where I particularly want to talk about. Man, how good does Clay Guida still look?
Yeah, this was a good main event for the this was a good main event for the preliminary card of the Fox Sports 2 portion. And Clay Guida was a big underdog coming into this fight. They had Eric Koch as a minus 360 favorite in the betting books, and Guida, in my eyes, won every round. Man, he was doing new innovative stuff like donkey kicks, like backwards donkey kicks. And what was most impressive to me, Dema, is he's got an elite gas tank. He's able to outwork guys that might be more skilled than him, but he was able to completely outwork Koch.
We saw I believe the term is scorpion kicks for the shit that he was throwing. But despite the innovative stuff you said, I think it was really the bread and butter. Clay Guida is what got him the victory. I mean, he pushed the pace. Mm-hmm. He stayed on Koch like relentlessly. Like once he got a hold of him, he stayed on him until he wrestled him down or put him on the fence or, you name it. And this is patented Clay Guida. This is the kind of stuff that we saw him do, 5 years ago.
Yeah, real veteran of the game. And albeit I might not see him winning the championship in that division, if you're not ready to deal with his gas tank, it's going to be a tough night for you.
Yeah, and I mean, his wrestling and grappling is pretty elite level as well. He'll go in there and make just about anybody look bad.
Yeah, good point, man. Starting out the main card portion, Dennis Siver was able to defeat BJ Penn, in a fight that probably should have happened a while ago.
Yep, this was the original return fight back for BJ. That did not happen. He had a bunch of reschedules, and he ended up fighting Yair Rodriguez in what was not a pretty fight to watch.
Yeah, this fight wasn't what I expected it to be. I mean, granted, it was competitive. I was just real disappointed in BJ Dema. I didn't see him like gassing that bad. I didn't think that was part of his DNA. He's always had a decent gas tank, and it was kind of sad to see, man. It felt like after the second round where he had a little bit of success, he just kind of ended up being a punching bag. And the problem that he had throughout the fight as well is like he I think he threw a little bit better strikes with the hands, but Sivers got a much bigger arsenal. Like neither one of these guys are going to be top ranked again, I don't think. But Sivers got an impressive arsenal of kicks, punches. His striking arsenal. He's got a lot of tools and he uses them.
Yep, this is what Dominic said during the broadcast, which stuck to me until now. He said that Seaver was using all the tools he had in his toolbox, the knees, the elbows, the kicks, the everything, whereas BJ relied on strictly boxing, which ultimately, he punched himself out, and the way he came in the third round was, he didn't have any kind of offense left, and telltale sign of a guy, not really wanting to fight anymore is when he stops throwing. So it was kind of a disappointing performance. He had moments where he shined. He was good with the jab in the first round, and he did land the uppercut in the second, which he won the round. You can give him the second round there probably for the knockdown, but man, he didn't have anything left in that third round.
Yeah, it's tough to see, and I mean, it wasn't completely unexpected. The betting lines were pretty darn even. Actually, it started Dennis Silver was a 2-1 favorite. But what's kind of shocking is this is 5 losses in a row for BJ Penn. A Hall of Famer.
Yeah, man, it's rough. Who am I to say stop fighting or not? But I don't think I want to see BJ fight anymore if it's going to be like this. It was a little bit rough there in the end, and Dennis Seaver is, yeah, I don't want to talk shit, but he's on the bottom echelon of that division.
I mean, I'm a proponent of, like, if he wants to lose 30 times in a row, let him lose 30 times in a row. I mean, it's hit, I don't think I'm the one to call if somebody should retire. But, like, at the same time, I don't want to see somebody drooling on themselves or being like Chuck Liddell, where your thoughts aren't all the way there.
Yeah, I mean, this BJ, this is many people's favorite fighter. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying with Fedor. I mean, this is why I love it and I hate it. It's very rough and it's unforgiving on the veterans that seem to linger around a little long.
It's definitely a young man's game.
Yep, and we saw it here. I mean, neither of the guys young or anything, but BJ is certainly the older and more worn of the two here. Moving into the next bout in welterweight division, Tim Means defeats Alex Garcia in a unanimous decision.
This was a good fight, Dima. Alex Garcia won the first round, and Tim Means won the second and third rounds. Is basically how the judges saw it all as well. It was a fight where Tim Means was able to kind of show his veteran savvy, and kind of like what we talked about in the first fight on the main card, just had a few more tools in the toolbox than Alex Garcia.
Agreed. Tim Means was able to go in there and show his veteran savvy, win the 2 out of the 3 rounds, and take it home.
Yeah, this was an impressive win for him, I'd say, because Alex Garcia is a strong opponent. I'd say he was probably at a strength disadvantage in this fight, and he was able to use his veteran savvy and still get the win. Moving right ahead, man, Dominic Reyes is an impressive prospect.
Yeah, going into this fight, he was coming off of 2 back-to-back head kick knockouts, and he certainly used some head kicks here in this fight, which ended via first round knockout as well.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about how impressive he was prior to this podcast, and what we noticed is he's one of the better light heavyweights at like mobility. He's a very mobile, big guy. And apparently we also found out that fighting is in his blood. He's got a brother that's 12-2 and on a 10-fight win streak.
Yeah, I thought this was something interesting. Fights in the lightweight division, whereas here Dominic here is light heavyweight. It's a welcome addition to this division. There's a couple of really potentially dangerous strikers here, like Manua and recently retired Rumble, who might return. Who knows?
The cousin.
The cousin, exactly.
Of course.
And yeah, he's like I said, he's a welcome division. This was a very quick work for him. The left cross was what set it off. He really rocked Joachim with a left cross, and then he threw like a kitchen sink combination at him, including some kicks, and then he hit him with another cross at the very end of the combination, which would just ended things for his opponent.
Yeah, for a big guy, I mean, this fight only took 29 seconds. He was able to really light up his opponent in that 29 seconds. He probably hit his opponent at least 29 times in that 29 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, he was really getting after it, and he's a pretty mobile, scary guy. My question is, how's his wrestling? That's what I want to see. I want to see somebody that's going to challenge his wrestling next.
I want to see a fight that goes longer than first round. I want to see him go into a deep water, so to say. That would be, I think, the next big step in his challenge. And a good wrestler could do that, like you said. I think Misha Serkinov would be a good fight for him. We were talking about it earlier.
Yeah, there's a lot of good matchups at light heavyweight, man. I like that division. I like the direction that's going.
Moving into the next fight, women's strawweight bout, Felice Herring impressively defeats Justine Kish via unanimous decision.
Shit happens.
Shit happens. Jokes.
Sorry, I had to.
It's fine. But listen. Jokes aside, I think it's one of the best ways to handle a shitty situation.
Yeah.
I think she came out, kind of had a good laugh at herself about it and said exactly what you said.
For the listeners that don't know what we're talking about, she had a little bit of accident in there. She was fighting to get out of chokes and stuff. It seemed like Herrig was one step ahead of her in all aspects of MMA, which I was surprised about. We both had Kish winning this fight, prior to it actually happening. Felice Herrig, man, that's just 3 in a row. She's somebody a long time ago I wrote off that I was probably wrong about right now.
She continues fighting against these, young, up-and-coming, and her as a veteran, she just continues sending everybody to school.
3 prospects in a row, and she, like, looking at her gym, she trains in, she's a real veteran, and she trains with a good camp, and she's dangerous.
I don't think a lot of people really realize that she's really been there for a long time. I think she's fought before Strikeforce even.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the, pioneers of the women's game that we talked about on the last episode.
Yeah,
definitely.
So continues to impress. I think it's going to be her next step in this division. It's going to be exciting. I think she's finally going to get like a top 5 opponent. I don't know who exactly. Somebody coming off of maybe a loss against Nunes, was it?
Yeah, who knows, man? She's definitely going to fight somebody in the top 5. Moving right ahead into the co-main event, which had a little bit of controversy as well, man. Johnny Hendricks came in overweight, again in this new weight class at middleweight. Not only did he come in overweight, but he got finished.
Before we talk about the finish, do you think he got a little comfortable there? Like, I don't have to lose as much weight. I can hit the French fries again. What do you think happened there?
Man, that's above my pay grade, Dema. I have no idea what is going on with Johnny Hendricks. Like, I've seen, like, guys decline. I've never seen guy be like a world beater one day and then 2 years later be like, hey, where are my French fries? Like, I don't even really like.
And hey, listen, like, he looked really good against Hector. He looked good making weight, and he was healthy, and just, again, something did not go right here.
Like, I'm no sports psychologist, and it's hard to diagnose it, but it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like he had it one day, and he just doesn't have it anymore, and I can't explain it.
Well, there's speculations that I don't want to get into, but but nonetheless, man, this was a great fight for Tim Boetsch, and the Barbarian had a great night. He came in there, he threw a head kick, kind of feinted, landed the head kick, and finished the fight in the patented Barbarian way, where he grabbed Johnny's head with his left, and he started clobbering him with those kind of dirty boxing uppercuts there to kind of finish and wrap things up in the second round. That was a hell of an impressive finish.
Yeah, if he wasn't named the Barbarian, man, he'd be called the Uppercut King, because he seems to have that uppercut down when he's got the other guy in trouble. But yeah, it was a real impressive finish. That head kick started it off, man. It was super impressive for a big guy like him to just get that kick up that quick and, know that he's hurt right away and jump on him.
Well, he feinted. Like, he made Johnny think it was gonna be like maybe a body kick or something like that, because Johnny started raising his hands up when I saw a GIF or a replay of it. it was a little bit way too late because it was already by that point going over his shoulder and wrapping around his head.
Yeah, Boach looks like one of those muscle shark guys
Mm-hmm.
that don't have movement, but you'd be really surprised by his mobility. It's a little bit I guess surprising is the word. I guess it's a little bit shocking to his opponents.
Yeah, man, he's it's a good rebound fight for him. He came in there, didn't look good against Jacare. Jacare made quick work of him going into this fight. He did everything right. Moving into the main event of the night, lightweight division. Kevin Lee defeats Michael Chiesa in the impressive, somewhat controversial, dominating. There's a lot of things that could be said about this finish. Where do you start with this?
Good question. I felt good about Kevin Lee's performance. Like you said, the stoppage, Mario Yamasaki should have given Chiesa more of a chance. What I kind of saw, I've replayed this 5-6 times, this finish, because like you said, it has a lot of controversy surrounding it. It was stopped early. Chiesa never tapped out. So in theory, he had a slim chance to get out of that choke. Now, knowing what I know, he had Michael Chiesa full on in a choke, and I haven't seen a guy as strong as Kevin Lee
Under the chin,
Yeah.
which was it's the
Yeah.
important part.
and it looked like his arms were going limp, and I think that's what Mario Yamasaki saw and why he ended the fight without a tap.
Yeah, he did flop just for a second there. Was it too quick? Yeah, I think ultimately that's my assessment of it. It's look, when it's such a elite level, like high level, high ranking fight, you gotta let him. It's you gotta let him fight till the end, and it's a technique. It's different from an armbar. It's not like it's going to severely hurt or injure somebody. The worst that can happen is he goes to sleep, which people wake up from. This is a lot less dangerous than an arm break or take an extra few punches to the head. So kind of a fuck up for Mario Yamasaki here. We did want to see the fight go all the way out to the end. I don't want to take shit away from Lee. He looked really fucking good in this fight. I mean, just the way he Chiesa, he took his back and just kind of rode on him for was it pretty much half of a round, I think, after they went down from the takedowns. He secured the back and had him for a couple of minutes there. So, yeah, man, I don't think, unfortunately, this gets to go to a rematch. Even though,
Eh,
what do you
I,
think?
I don't really care for a rematch. I thought it was pretty dominant performance by Kevin Lee. I thought he had, if I'm being very generous, I thought he had a 5% chance to get out of that choke with 47 seconds left in the round. And that's being super generous. My best example for this choke, and even to go along with your point about the ref should have let it play out, this is kind of like what Misha Tate got Holly Holm in, almost identical. This is almost identical. And the difference in that fight and in this fight was, in this one, the referee robbed both the victor and the loser of an actual finish, of a
Exactly.
conclusion.
Yeah,
Of
and,
a
and that's
conclusion. And Tate Holm got a conclusion because the ref was a little bit more aware of what he was doing. And I don't want to shit on the ref, man. It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig, but at the end of the day, Yamasaki screwed it up.
exactly. And they were both robbed of what they came in there for, which is to me the most disappointing aspect of it. I think it was a little bit more competitive than a lot of people give it. I think Chiesa did score a takedown there, which Lee was able to get up from. They went down again, and after that, it seems Lee was able to secure the back. However, to Chiesa's defense, he gets his back taken a few times, and he survives a lot. He perseveres in his fights. That's why I was a little bit bummed out to see it. Other than that, I wouldn't be opposed against a rematch. I just don't think it's likely to happen. UFC seems to really like Lee, and I think they're going to continue running with him and promote him as as kind of the next guy that they're gonna push in that division. And they're already slightly planting seeds a little bit, like that shit with Tony Ferguson there interviewing them at the end. That little back and forth, I don't think that was accidental.
No, the UFC does stuff like that on purpose, and they definitely set fights up for the future. But I think what's you asked me earlier what's going to happen. I think Lee is going to advance in the division, and Chiesa is going to stay about put. And I think deservedly so. In that fight, we saw enough. We saw the better fighter. We saw him, pretty much dominate that fight, minus maybe 2 seconds in there where, you know, Chiesa was able to take him down and Lee got up immediately, and that was pretty much the extent of Chiesa's success in that fight. I think deservingly so. And Kevin Lee, he's got a strategy that can give those guys a problem. While in my eyes, I don't think Chiesa's got a strategy that can give the top guys in that division, like Khabib's, the Tony Ferguson's. I don't see him giving those guys too many issues.
Indeed. I have a feeling that I think they're going to really push Lee and Ferguson thing and try to make that happen. I mean, both of them want to fight Khabib, but at this point, the king himself, or I don't know if it came from Connor, but I think it was Kavanaugh or something, he said, after we do this whole Mayweather thing, I think we want to fight Khabib in Russia. And I think that's where they might gear towards. I don't know if it'll actually happen in Russia.
Yeah, that's way down the road. That's cool and all, but I like this Kevin Lee, man. I like what he's doing. I like this shtick that he's got of just being abrasive. Just being like a guy. He's embracing the bad guy role a little bit like Chael Sonnen, but at the same time, he does have impressive skills, man. He's on quite a win streak, and like you said, if that fight with Ferguson happens, it's an impressive fight with two guys on real impressive win streaks.
Indeed, Genya. Wow, what an episode it's been. We got to the big 2-0.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun, but it's crazy, man. This is what we look for as MMA fans, like this week especially. We had fights both days of the weekend. We had a doubleheader. Unfortunately, as I rambled about earlier in the episode, we didn't get to see each other, so this episode 20 was kind of exciting because we got to talk about some stuff for the first time, which is a little bit unusual. Typically, we're regurgitating stuff we've already, discussed. But nevertheless, discussing episode 20, man, it's nice that we made it this far, man. I feel good about it. I like the growth that we've had. And the support that we've received. That's the biggest part. That's key to me, man. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people, and people enjoy our efforts.
And for episode 20, I mean, we couldn't have had a better weekend. We had two events. Bellator, arguably, with their best event to this day. UFC Fight Night 112. Chiesa Lee definitely brought the fireworks. It had some really good fights there. Not without controversy for both events, but stuff to talk about for us here at the Shoot the Ones.
Yeah, and our loyal listeners are maybe wondering why we didn't talk about the Tough 25 finale. We will talk about the results on the next episode, but we didn't want to spoil the fights that happened last night.
And to be totally honest with you guys, we have some catching up to do. We got to watch the last couple of episodes of Tough and really see what happened in there. Word on the street is Cody's team is completely out. So,
yeah. Well, let's quickly talk about the main event of it, man. Justin Gaethje, Michael Johnson. That's a fun fight.
Yeah, that is going to be a good fight. Gaethje coming from World Series of Fighting, now known as Professional Fight League. Is that what they're billing themselves as now these days?
Professional fight something, man. I'm not sure exactly, but it is professional something. There used to be a professional fight league, and I think that's what they're kind of mimicking.
Nonetheless, I think they're going to have their first event coming up soon.
Either this weekend John Fitch main eventing?
Yeah.
Which is weird because I thought he was retiring, but nice to see him back nevertheless.
All right. So we have their champion in Gaethje, one of the most exciting, balls to the wall, crazy punchers. And
Skilled wrestler too, man.
skilled wrestler too, and you have your staple of the lightweight division, and Michael Johnson, which a lot of people honestly sleep on.
And this is a fun fight for the fans, man. You got Michael Johnson, who's a real technical, compact striker, and you got Justin Gaethje that just goes for it, man. He's got no fear in there at all, which is going to make for a very interesting fight. And their wrestling kind of cancels each other's out. Maybe Gaethje's a little bit better wrestler. He was pretty high collegiate wrestler. But Michael Johnson's no slouch in the wrestling either. I mean, that's his original background as well. So these are pretty much two wrestler strikers.
Not only that,
wrestlers that prefer to strike.
Wrestle boxers. I like to use that term, and man, Michael Johnson is really good with his hands. I mean, he's usually he's a level or two above your typical wrestler boxer types, but he was able to land on Khabib. He had him rocked in there, just briefly, but still he was able to put his hands on arguably one of the best lightweight fighters. And a lot of people sleep on and forget something. He fought Ferguson, and he beat Ferguson pretty much with his left hand alone. I mean, he countered and played the boxing game in this fight against Ferguson really well.
And there's animosity going into this fight. These guys have been talking a lot of noise to each other online.
Yeah,
they don't like each other. Michael Johnson, he doesn't want to. He doesn't think he's the welcoming guy. He's not the doormat. And Justin Gaethje thinks he legitimately thinks he's gonna take over that lightweight division. And he's with his skill set, he's got an opportunity, but he's got a dangerous skill set for himself also, because he's always immune to getting hurt himself with his style.
Yeah, he does tend to get reckless, and yeah, man, I think this is a good welcoming fight for him. I definitely don't think Johnson is a gatekeeper by any means.
No, but I do think he's going to open the gate for Justin Gaethje. I think that Justin Gaethje is going to come in. He's going to be super impressive versus Michael Johnson, and it's going to open up a boatload of opportunities for him at lightweight there.
I can't, in good conscience, go against Johnson again in a fight where that I can see him winning, just because he's so slept on, and as a betting guy, he's won me a lot of money.
That's true. He has come through as the underdog on many occasions, just like you and I as the Shoot the Ones host.
Right on.
20 episodes in.
Yep, still around, and still dedicated to this thing. We're still passionate about MMA as a sport, so we're gonna continue rolling this thing. We're trying to refine it. We're trying to trim some fat. We're trying to give you guys a better podcast.
Yeah, and thanks for coming along on this journey with us. You can always find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, MMApodcast.com, or anywhere the top podcasts are heard.
Very well said. So that wraps up our big episode 20 of Shoot the Ones podcast. We're glad to have you here for the ride. Next week, we'll be coming with the episode 21. We'll talk about the Ultimate Fighter finale. That's going to be, I believe, the Ultimate Fighter 25. Mm-hmm. Yes. And we're excited to talk about the Justin Gaethje and Michael Johnson's fight that's going to go down that main card.
Yeah, as well as TUF Season 25 winner of the Bellator season, which has been a real exciting season. I would suggest to the people that haven't watched, catch up on it, man. It's a good season. Definitely worth the watch.
Yes, sir. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for all the feedback. You guys know where to catch us. Dema and Genya out.